Hey Speech Fam, do you want some easy ways to not have to plan your speech therapy sessions? Don't worry, I've got you. I'm gonna give you 5 easy games you can play with your students to promote speech and language skills, and they're low prep and very fun. As a student of comedy improv for about half a decade now, I have personally seen the positive effects of comedy improv rules and games in my own life, but also as a speech language pathologist, as I have used some of these games with elementary school students in my speech sessions. Well, improv has so many benefits for just communication and connection with other humans. It can also be really helpful for little ones because it improves their ability to make human connections, to communicate, it boosts confidence, and it fosters creativity and flexibility. I also love that it starts to teach at even a young age this idea of the fact that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not get things right, which is something that as an adult I've had to relearn or unlearn and relearn in a sense. And most importantly, using these kinds of games that have these rules based in a comedy improv style encourages playfulness and authenticity and fun, which is a great place to build these connections, to have this relationship-driven communication and overall intrinsic motivation going into a speech therapy session. So let's get into it. The first game I'm going to teach you about is called the yes and game. So the number one rule in improv is to say yes and, which means we are saying yes to whatever reality our scene partner or our group has brought up in this very improvised style, and then we're adding information. What a great concept when you're working on maybe sentence structure or narrative language, right? Getting more information into that communication or that moment, into that communicative situation. So you can teach children the concept of saying yes and just maybe start a simple scene just around your therapy table, have like kind of a back and forth with each student or let them go back and forth by saying something, anything, and then having the next student say yes and add information to that in a way that doesn't deny anything, but carries on the information and allows that information to go forward. So for example, you as a therapist probably want to make sure you have some structure there when you're teaching this. You can say, I see a big red ball. There doesn't have to be a big red ball in the room. It could be easier for especially little ones if you're talking about something that is right there and tangible. But the idea is you say, I see a big red ball. And the child is guided to respond with yes, and it's bouncing really high. Again, we're not actually seeing a big red ball bouncing, but the idea is that we're creating this environment or this scene in an imaginary way that can get really fun, but we're not saying, I see a big red ball, and then you're saying, yes, and I see a blue sky, because we want to carry on what the first person said. We want to keep adding to that specific thing. This game is really good because it promotes active listening, collaboration among you and your student, or even the students themselves, depending on what age and how independently they can kind of carry on these things. You just have to find where you make those accommodations and modifications as the group leader. But it also sparks creativity, and I think that is such a fun place for kids to learn when they get to be creative, when they get to be a little bit silly and speak whatever's on their mind. Sometimes in school, with the structures and the routines, it can be hard for little ones to understand where those lines are of speaking what's on their mind and not. So this just really allows them to kind of feel that they can be authentic. Obviously, we're trying to stay on somewhat of a topic, but even if we're not, you as the director or the group leader or the speech therapist, you can kind of help them merge their thoughts with the concept, right? And kind of see where those can connect. The next really fun game is the sound effects challenge. This one's really silly. You can engage children in this activity where they have to use their vocal abilities to create different sounds from different scenarios. Super simple, really great for maybe imitation, really great, again, just to be silly, to get a little bit creative. And also, if you're working on speech sounds specifically, you can help them think of scenarios where they can hear their speech sounds. So for instance, let's say you come up with the idea of having them think of sounds when you're making breakfast. So what are all the sounds that you would hear when you're making breakfast? Well, let's say you have a student working on S. That's perfect, right? S and Z, you can for the sizzle of bacon or for the water running. Maybe they hear an egg crack and it's working on their K. They don't have to be working on speech sounds for this game, but that's a really great way to kind of build in those isolated speech sounds. But this also can encourage, you're thinking of certain things that happen in certain scenarios or certain rooms of the house, right? We're talking about categories and vocabulary. If you're working with really little ones, this is a great way to, if you're doing some imaginative play or dramatic play even, when you're in the kitchen areas in a preschool classroom, you can be coming up with these sounds and encouraging that imitation. So there's a lot you can do here with just such a simple game. You literally didn't have to prep anything or plan anything but the scenarios maybe that they're coming up with. If they're older, have them come up with the scenarios for each other. All right, the next game. This is a great one for vocabulary and language. The word association circle. So if you have a group of kids, this one's really easy to do with, but if it's just you and another student, that's fine too. You wanna get in a circle. This is a really great way to get them up out of their seats. That can even help spark some creativity. So what you'll do, you'll start with thinking of a category or a word. So let's say the category you give is animals. Each student takes a turn coming up with something that's associated with that category. Another really fun way you can modify this if you want to give a little bit more of a challenge is you start maybe with a category or just a word. So let's say the word is couch. Now the student next to you has to just say whatever word that's associated with couch that they think of. So they might think of pillow, and then the next kid might think of sleep, and then the next kid might think of night. And then sometimes it can get a little bit silly because the kid over here is like, night? What made you think of night? And it's like, we now have to kind of all together come up with what might have happened in that situation, which obviously night is understandable, but you get what I'm saying? It can be silly and it's fun. It keeps the nuance alive because you never know what's gonna come. And then, you might have the kid that's like, I was gonna say that. And it's like a moment to connect. So just really fun, a fun way to work on word retrieval, vocabulary. You can think of words or things that come up unexpectedly. So a lot of fun. This next one is one of my favorites, mime and guess. This one gets the kids up and moving. You can again put them in a circle and have one person start, and what they have to do is some kind of an action, a very intentional action like pouring water into a glass, mowing the lawn, things that we would do in real life. Not, obviously this, but the whole idea is that they are doing something like we would all know and have seen or done ourselves. And then the person next to them or next in the circle has to guess what they were doing. So again, there's that nuance, there's that ability to be creative. And it really focuses on that nonverbal communication, maybe picking up communication cues, understanding gestures, body language, and also just having the ability to, again, if you're working on some expressive language, then the person that's guessing is working on, that expressive piece of when they're guessing, they're using their language to share what they're doing. But also on the other hand too, when you're doing these nonverbal cues and things, that's expressive language too. So there's a lot you can be monitoring here. My last idea for you is the character creation game. This one is definitely something that you do a lot when you're in theater and comedy improv, where you're focused on creating very unique characteristics, maybe a voice, or we'll do accents in comedy improv, specific ways you move your body, specific facial expressions. So you as the SLP maybe would give your student a silly voice to do. You would have them imitate it when you do it. You might give them a funny movement or an exaggerated gesture, and then encourage them to use their imaginations and develop a short story or scene based on what these characters do. So if you give student A a really silly, fast-paced way of talking, and then you give student B kind of a scrunched face where they have, they look mad, maybe now tell them to look at each other and come up with something they would say to each other if they were neighbors or if they were sisters or whatever, and kind of see what happens and let them kind of surmise what to do based on the characteristics they have. This activity is really good for narrative skills because you can have each student create a story about themselves. You can have them together kind of create a story about what's happening with these two characters. And it can also be an opportunity for kids to practice using different speech sounds or language structures within the context of their character's story. Another fun thing to do is you can expand on this. Have them get up in front of the rest of the group. If you have 2 at a time, act out a scene. Let them be silly. And then you as the speech therapist can choose specific vocabulary they use. Then you can remember that and you guys can continue to review that session after session. And you always have that fun scene to look back on. Remember, with any therapy idea or activity, you want to make sure that you're accommodating and modifying as needed. These are very fun and interactive activities. They create a fun environment for kids to learn, and overall provide that unique and engaging way to participate with one another and to build those human connections that are vital for communication. I hope you found this helpful. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you'd like to hear more about. I would love to share more ideas based on comedy improv and speech therapy. So if you'd like that, just give me a thumbs up. And as always, there's resources in the caption for you to find more freebies and different ideas for therapy or for yourself as a speech language pathologist. Have a great week, have a great day, and I'll see you on the next one.